Yo,
Stop scrolling.
right now.
Because what 50 just did to Jim Jones is not beef anymore. This is not trolling. This is not Instagram clowning. This is a grown man with surveillance footage, building access, timestamps, and landlord energy pulling up on another grown man like a property manager serving eviction papers on a Monday morning. And the wildest part? Jim Jones is still out here acting like everything is fine. Still posting.
Still laughing.
Still doing his little karate chop response like this whole situation is a joke. But here's the thing about 50 Cent that Jim Jones clearly forgot. 50 does not joke. 50 does not troll for fun. Every single move 50 makes has a purpose. Every post has a plan behind it. Every receipt he drops is timed perfectly. And right now 50 is not just exposing Jim Jones the rapper. He is exposing Jim Jones the man, the business, the operation, the whole IFC factory situation. And what is coming out of this exposure is so much bigger than a studio beef. This is about ownership,
Power. Control.
and the fact that one man has all the receipts and the other man has nothing but jokes. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why Jim Jones should have never let this go public. Let's get into it. Alright, so to really understand why this situation between 50 Cent and Jim Jones has gone from funny to absolutely federal, we got to go back and lay the foundation first. Because this did not start with surveillance footage. This did not start with eviction papers. This started the way all great 50 Cent situations start. With a target, a moment of weakness, and a man who saw an opportunity and decided to squeeze it until there was nothing left. And the target this time was Jim Jones. Capo.
Diplomats.
Harlem legend. A man who has spent the last 2 decades building a reputation as one of the most respected voices to ever come out of New York rap. And 50 Cent just dragged that reputation through a hallway camera angle at 3 in the morning. Now, before we get into the footage and what it means, we have to talk about who these two men are. Because the context matters enormously here. 50 Cent is not just a rapper. He has not been just a rapper for a very long time. He is a businessman, a producer, a television executive, a man who turned power into one of the most successful cable dramas in history, a man who has built an entertainment empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And more importantly for this specific situation, he is a man who knows how to use information, how to time a release, how to drop a receipt at exactly the right moment to cause maximum damage. This is not accidental. Everything 50 does publicly is calculated. Every post, every caption, every piece of footage. It is all part of a strategy that most people do not fully understand until it is too late. And then there is Jim Jones. Now Jim is not a slouch. Let us be very clear about that. Jim Jones has been in this industry for over 20 years. He co-founded the Diplomats alongside Cameron and built one of the most iconic rap crews New York has ever seen. Dipset was not just a rap group. It was a movement, a cultural moment, a fashion statement, a lifestyle. And Jim was right in the center of all of that. He has survived industry changes, label drama, personal beef, and every kind of turbulence the music business throws at artists who stay in the game long enough. He is a survivor. But surviving the music industry and surviving 50 Cent are two completely different skill sets. And Jim Jones is about to find that out the hard way. So, how did we get here? How did we get from 2 New York rap legends to surveillance footage and eviction energy? It started with something that looked small. Something that looked like a regular piece of internet back and forth.
50 posted something about Jim.
Jim responded. And instead of leaving it there, instead of letting 50 have his moment, and moving on, Jim decided to get funny. He did the karate chop, the martial arts response, the comedic deflection that Jim clearly thought would make 50 look silly. That would make the whole situation seem like a joke. That would allow Jim to save face in front of his audience without directly engaging with whatever 50 was pushing. It was a smart play in theory. In practice, it was the worst thing Jim Jones could have done. Because here is what Jim forgot. 50 does not play the game the way other rappers play it. Most rappers respond to trolling with more trolling. They match energy. They clap back on the same level. But 50 does not work like that. When you make 50 look like he is joking, he does not come back with another joke. He comes back with documentation. He comes back with proof. He comes back with the kind of receipts that make people realize this was never a joke to begin with. And that is exactly what happened. Within hours of Jim's karate chop response, 50 dropped what can only be described as a surveillance package. Not one clip, multiple clips, different angles, different timestamps, hallway footage, entry footage, people coming in, people going out, doors being kicked, property being damaged. The whole situation laid out like a landlord presenting evidence in a civil court proceeding. And the internet immediately lost its mind, because nobody was ready for this. Nobody expected 50 to come back with actual footage. Nobody expected this to escalate from social media banter to what looks like a genuine property dispute with real-world legal implications. People were looking at their screens saying, wait, is this real? Does 50 actually have access to this building surveillance system? Does he actually know the owner? Is Jim Jones actually in this footage doing what 50 is claiming he is doing? Now here is where our sources come in, because we started making calls. We started reaching out to people who move through the New York entertainment real estate space, people who know how these studio buildings operate, people who understand the relationship between artists and the spaces they use for their operations. And what we found out is something that changes the entire dynamic of the situation. According to a source close to the building management who asked to remain anonymous because they were not authorized to speak publicly, the property in question has been a point of tension for several months. Not just between 50 and Jim, but between multiple parties who have financial and operational interests in the space. Our source told us that Jim Jones has been operating out of this location, calling it his IFC factory, presenting it publicly as his space, his operation, his creative hub. But according to the building records and the ownership documentation that our source described to us, the situation is considerably more complicated than Jim has been letting on publicly. The space was never solely Jim's. There were agreements in place, financial arrangements, and according to our source, those arrangements had been deteriorating for a significant period of time before any of this became public. And then there is the 50 angle. Because the question everybody is asking right now is, how does 50 have access to this surveillance footage? How does a man who is not supposed to be connected to this building have multiple camera angles and timestamps from inside the property? And the answer to that question, according to our source, is the most interesting part of this entire story. 50 did not hack anything. 50 did not illegally obtain anything. 50 has a relationship with the person who owns the building. A real relationship. A documented relationship. He even posted a photo with the owner, making it clear that this connection is not something he is hiding. He is putting it right in everybody's face. He is saying, I know the man who owns the space, and he is showing me everything that is happening inside it. And that right there is the power move that Jim Jones completely underestimated. Because when 50 posted that surveillance footage, he was not just exposing what Jim was doing in that building. He was demonstrating that he has access that Jim does not have. He was showing that in this specific situation, 50 is not the outsider. 50 is the one with the relationships. 50 is the one with the connections to the actual power structure that controls the space. And Jim Jones, for all his talk about IFC factories and operations and running his own spot, is operating in a building where somebody else has more pull than he does. And that somebody just decided to make that very clear in front of the entire internet. Now fans online have been going absolutely crazy over this. Comment sections everywhere have been on fire since the footage dropped. People are saying things like 50 is built different because he comes back with paperwork every single time. Others are saying Jim should have just let the first post go because now he is in a situation that is way bigger than a rap beef. Some people are defending Jim, saying 50 is using his industry connections to bully somebody who does not have the same resources. And others are pointing out that if Jim was really running that spot the way he says he was running it, then why does somebody else have surveillance access to the whole operation? But here is what nobody is talking about yet. Here is the angle that everyone is missing while they are focused on the footage and the karate chop and the landlord energy. The real question in this situation is not who owns the building. The real question is what was actually happening inside that building that made 50 decide this was the moment to go public with all of this. Because 50 does not drop receipts randomly. He drops them when he wants something, when he is making a point, when he is sending a message that goes beyond the surface level beef. And the message he is sending right now with the surveillance footage is so much bigger than Jim Jones. It is a message to everybody in the industry who thinks they can operate in spaces connected to 50's network without consequences. It is a message about power, about access, about who really controls what in the New York entertainment landscape. And Jim Jones just became the example, whether he likes it or not. Now, that is exactly where things start to get really interesting. Because while everybody online is focused on the surveillance footage and the landlord energy and the karate chop response, something else was happening behind the scenes that nobody has fully connected yet. And this is the part that our sources are telling us is the real story underneath the story. The part that explains why 50 chose this specific moment to drop this specific footage in this specific way. And when you hear it, everything is going to click into place in a way that is going to make you look at this whole situation completely differently. See, the thing about 50 Cent that casual observers miss is that he never operates on one level. There is always a surface story, and then there is the real story underneath it. The surface story here is simple. Jim Jones damaged property in a building connected to 50's network. 50 has the footage. 50 is posting it. Jim is embarrassed. That is the surface. But our sources are telling us the real story goes much deeper than a broken door and a hallway camera angle. According to an insider who has direct knowledge of the New York entertainment real estate scene, the IFC factory that Jim Jones has been publicly presenting as his operation was never set up the way Jim has been describing it. Our source told us that the space was originally established as a shared creative hub, a place where multiple artists and entertainment businesses could operate under one roof. A collaborative space, not a solo operation, not Jim's personal empire. A shared infrastructure with multiple stakeholders and multiple financial interests involved. Now here is where it gets complicated. According to our source, over time the arrangement around the space began to shift. Certain parties who were supposed to be contributing to the operational costs of the building started falling behind. Agreements that were made verbally and in some cases in writing were not being honored the way they were supposed to be honored. And the tension around these financial arrangements had been building quietly for months before any of this became public. Our source described the atmosphere around the situation as a pressure cooker that was always going to explode. The only question was when and how. And then Jim Jones made the karate chop video. And 50 decided that was the when and the how. That was the moment he had been waiting for. That was the opening he needed to take everything that had been simmering privately and bring it into the public eye in a way that would force the situation to a resolution. Because here's the thing about 50 Cent and public pressure. He understands better than almost anybody in the entertainment industry that public humiliation is a negotiating tool. That putting somebody's business in the street in front of millions of people creates a kind of pressure that private conversations never can. And he used that tool with surgical precision on Jim Jones. Now the reactions from the industry have been something to behold. People who have worked with both 50 and Jim over the years have been watching this situation very carefully and very quietly. Nobody wants to publicly take a side because nobody wants to be on the wrong side of 50 Cent. That is just the reality of the situation. But privately, according to our sources, the conversations happening in industry circles are fascinating. One music industry veteran who has worked with artists on both sides of the situation and who asked to remain completely anonymous told us that what 50 is doing right now is a masterclass in leverage. He said that most people in the industry have situations like this: financial disputes, property disagreements, business arrangements that went sideways. But most people handle those situations privately because they do not have the platform or the nerve to take it public. 50 has both. And he is using both. Another source who moves through New York entertainment circles told us that Jim Jones is in a much more difficult position than his social media presence is letting on. They said that the footage 50 posted is not just embarrassing on a personal level. It has real business implications for Jim. Because the IFC Factory brand that Jim has been building publicly, the image of himself as an independent operator running his own creative space, that image takes a serious hit when surveillance footage drops, showing what appears to be unauthorized access and property damage. Investors do not like that.
Partners do not like that.
People who are considering doing business with Jim's operation are now looking at this situation and asking serious questions. And then there is the legal dimension. Because our investigative team started looking into the potential legal exposure in this situation, and what we found is genuinely alarming for Jim Jones. Property damage claims in New York real estate disputes can get extremely expensive extremely fast. We are not just talking about the cost of replacing a door or repairing a lock. We are talking about potential claims for business interruption, for loss of use, for the cost of enhanced security measures, for emotional distress in some jurisdictions. And when you add the fact that 50 has surveillance footage with timestamps and multiple angles, the evidentiary situation for Jim is not good. Not good at all. A legal source who specializes in New York real estate disputes and who spoke to us on condition of anonymity told us that the footage 50 posted, if authentic and legally obtained, could form the basis of a very significant civil claim. They said that the combination of visible property damage, clear identification of the individuals involved, and documented timestamps creates exactly the kind of paper trail that makes these cases difficult to defend against. They said if this goes to court, and there is no reason to believe it will not go to court, Jim Jones is going to be sitting across a table from some very expensive lawyers explaining some very uncomfortable footage. But here is where the story takes a turn that nobody online is talking about yet. Because while everybody is focused on the legal and financial implications for Jim, our sources are telling us that there is a third party in this situation who has been completely invisible so far. Somebody who is connected to both the building and to the financial arrangements around the IFC factory operation. Somebody whose name has not appeared in any of the social media posts. Somebody who 50 has not mentioned publicly. And according to our source, this third party is the key to understanding why this situation escalated the way it did, and why it is about to get significantly messier than anything the internet has seen so far. Because here is the thing that nobody is asking yet. If Jim was operating in this space for months, if he was publicly calling it his IFC factory, if he was bringing people in and running his operation out of this location, then who was letting him do that? Who had the authority to give Jim access to that space in the first place? And why did that arrangement fall apart in a way that ended with surveillance footage on 50 Cent's Instagram page? The answer to those questions involves a name that has not come up yet. And according to our source, when that name comes out, the entire narrative around the situation is going to shift in ways that nobody currently predicting the outcome of this beef is prepared for. Because this was never just about Jim Jones kicking a door or 50 having landlord energy. This is about a much larger network of business relationships, financial arrangements, and power structures in the New York entertainment world that are now being exposed one surveillance clip at a time. And 50 Cent, whether he planned it this way from the beginning or simply saw an opportunity and took it, is now sitting at the center of a situation that could reshape how people understand the real power dynamics behind the scenes of New York hip-hop. Not the rap beef version, the real version, the business version. The version where the man with the most receipts wins regardless of who has the most music or the most followers or the most history in the game. And Jim Jones right now has the jokes. 50 has the receipts. And in the world that 50 Cent operates in, receipts always win. Always. But here is what is about to make this situation 10 times more complicated. Because just when you think you understand what is happening, just when you think the story is about surveillance footage and property damage and landlord energy, a new piece of information is about to drop that is going to reframe this entire situation from the beginning. And it is coming from a source that neither 50 nor Jim is going to be happy about, because it is coming from inside the building itself. And what that source is about to reveal is going to change everything you think you know about who is really in control of the situation and why. That is exactly where we are going in part 3. And trust me, you are not ready for what comes next. Alright, so here we are. The moment everything comes together. The moment all the pieces that have been sitting separately finally connect into one picture that is so clear and so damning that you are going to wonder how nobody saw it coming. because the source inside the building that we mentioned at the end of part 2 finally came through. And what they told us is the kind of information that does not just change the narrative around this specific situation. It changes the entire way you understand the relationship between 50 Cent and the New York entertainment infrastructure that has been operating quietly behind the scenes for years. The source, a person who has direct operational knowledge of the building and who has been present during multiple interactions involving both Jim Jones and parties connected to 50 Cent's business network, told us something that stopped our entire team cold. They said that Jim Jones did not just stumble into this building. Jim did not randomly find a space and start calling it his IFC factory. He was brought into the building, introduced to the arrangement, shown the space, and given access through a chain of connections that traces directly back to people in 50 Cent's extended business network. Not 50 himself. Not a direct invitation from 50. But through the kind of interconnected relationships that exist in New York entertainment, where everybody is connected to everybody through 2 or 3 degrees of separation. And here is why that matters enormously. Because if Jim's access to the space came through connections linked to 50's network, then the question of how 50 has surveillance access to the building takes on a completely different meaning. It is not just that 50 knows the owner. It is that 50 may have been aware of Jim's presence in that building for much longer than the social media timeline suggests. It is that the decision to go public with this footage was not a reaction to the karate chop video. The karate chop video was simply the trigger. The ammunition had been sitting there waiting to be fired for a very long time. Our source described the situation this way. They said that for months people connected to the building had been watching Jim operate in the space with increasing frustration. Not because of anything personal against Jim, but because the financial arrangements that were supposed to support his use of the space were not being honored. Bills that were supposed to be paid were not being paid. Agreements that were supposed to be respected were not being respected. And the people with actual authority over the building were running out of patience. Our source said the situation had reached a point where something was going to happen regardless of the social media beef. The Instagram posts just accelerated the timeline. Now, when this information started circulating in industry circles, the reaction was immediate and electric. People who had been watching the situation as entertainment suddenly realized they were watching something with real financial and legal consequences playing out in real time on social media. An entertainment lawyer who spoke to us and who has handled multiple high-profile New York real estate disputes in the music industry told us that the scenario our source described is more common than people realize. They said that informal arrangements around creative spaces in New York are extremely common and extremely problematic. Artists shake hands on deals that never get properly documented. Verbal agreements get made about cost sharing and operational responsibilities. And when those arrangements break down, the people with the least documentation and the least formal connection to the property always end up in the worst position. And right now, Jim Jones is in the worst position. But then our source dropped the detail that changed everything. The detail that reframes this entire situation from beginning to end. They told us that in the days before 50 posted the surveillance footage, there was a meeting. Not a public meeting. Not a social media live. A private sit-down between parties connected to the building and parties connected to Jim's operation. A meeting where the financial situation was laid out clearly and where Jim's team was given an opportunity to resolve things quietly. Without public exposure. Without surveillance footage. Without eviction energy on Instagram. A genuine opportunity to handle the situation the way business disputes are supposed to be handled. Behind closed doors. With documents and handshakes and agreements that keep everybody's reputation intact. And according to our source, Jim's response to that meeting was not what the building's representatives were hoping for. Our source described the response as dismissive, as if the people in that meeting did not have the authority or the leverage to make demands of Jim Jones. As if the situation was not as serious as it was being presented. As if the whole thing would just go away if Jim ignored it long enough. And that dismissiveness, according to our source, is what sealed Jim's fate. Because when you dismiss 50 Cent's network, privately 50 Cent responds publicly. Every single time. Without exception. So the karate chop video was not the cause of the surveillance footage drop. The karate chop video was the permission. It was Jim Jones publicly demonstrating the same dismissiveness that he had shown privately in that meeting. And 50 looked at that video and said, "Perfect. You want to make this a joke in public? Let me show everybody exactly what the joke really is." And he dropped the footage. Multiple angles, multiple timestamps, the whole package, laid out for the entire internet to see, like a man who had been waiting for exactly the right moment and finally got it. Now, the fallout from all of this is still developing in real time. But our sources are already giving us a picture of what the next few weeks look like for both parties. On 50's side, the situation could not be going better. He has demonstrated leverage. He has demonstrated access. He has demonstrated that he operates with a level of preparation and documentation that most people in the entertainment industry simply do not have. His brand as the man who always has the receipts has been reinforced in the most spectacular way possible. And the business relationships he has in New York real estate and entertainment infrastructure have been publicly validated in a way that money cannot buy. On Jim's side, the picture is considerably darker. The legal exposure is real and growing. The business implications for the IFC Factory brand are serious. Partners and investors who are considering involvement with Jim's operation are now asking questions that Jim is going to find very difficult to answer. The image of himself as an independent operator running his own creative empire has taken a hit that social media jokes cannot repair. And the private meeting that happened before all of this went public means that Jim cannot claim he did not know this was coming. He had a chance to handle it quietly.
He chose not to.
And now he is living with the consequences of that choice in front of millions of people. But here is the final twist. The detail that our source saved for last. The thing that is going to make you sit back and rethink everything you just heard. According to our source, the building at the center of this entire situation is not just a studio space. It is not just a creative hub. It is a property that sits at the center of a much larger real estate play that involves multiple parties across the New York entertainment landscape. A play that has been in development for over 2 years. A play that 50 Cent's network has been quietly positioning itself around for a significant period of time. And Jim Jones's presence in that building, the arrangement that brought him there, the financial disagreements that developed, and the surveillance footage that ended up on Instagram were never separate from that larger play. They were always part of it. Every step of this situation, from Jim getting access to the space to the private meeting to the social media footage drop, was movement on a chessboard that Jim Jones did not even know he was sitting at. And that is the real story here. Not the beef. Not the footage. Not the landlord energy. The real story is that 50 Cent has been playing a game that Jim Jones did not know was happening. And by the time Jim realized he was in the game, it was already over. The footage was already dropped. The leverage was already established. The narrative was already written. And Jim Jones is now a character in a 50 Cent story rather than the star of his own. Now, before we wrap this up, I need you to do something right now. If you made it to the end of this video, you already know this was not your average beef coverage. This was a full breakdown of a situation that goes way deeper than surveillance footage and karate chops. So hit that like button immediately.
Right now. Not at the end. Right now.
Because that like button tells the algorithm that this kind of deep investigative content deserves to be seen by everybody who thinks the story is just about 2 rappers arguing on Instagram. And hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications, because this situation is far from over. The legal proceedings that are likely coming. The identity of the third party who brokered Jim's original access to the building. The details of the private meeting that happened before the footage dropped. We're going to have all of it as it develops. You do not want to find out what happens next from somebody else's page. Now get into that comment section right now and tell me what you really think. Did Jim Jones make a massive mistake by dismissing that private meeting and choosing public jokes over quiet resolution? Do you think 50 Cent planned this entire public exposure from the moment Jim got access to that building? And most importantly, do you think Jim Jones has any move left that gets him out of this situation without serious legal and financial consequences? Or is this already over and Jim just does not know it yet? Drop your honest thoughts below, because this community always brings the most intelligent takes, and every single comment gets read. We will see you in the next one. Stay safe out here. And remember, in the game of receipts, the man with the most documentation always wins.
Peace.